Hello, welcome to the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences Grand Rounds. My name is Joe Saramelli. I oversee Grand Rounds for our department. I want to mention a couple of points about this academic year's Grand Rounds series. One about today's presentation. Please write any comments or questions into the chat or the Q&A. I'll keep track of those, and we'll have an opportunity at the end to go through questions and comments with today's presenters. There's a group of us that works on Grand Rounds each week, including Samar Abraha on coordination and communications, Mike Walker on technology, and then starting in 2 weeks with our once monthly in-person hybrid events with Charles on site there at Harborview. There's several sources of funding for this year's series, including the Ripley Fund, the Garvey Institute for Brain Health Solutions, and the Treatment of Mood Disorders Fund. Now, today's presentation has a group. There are several people presenting, and I think the best next step is I turn it over to Jürgen, who can talk a little bit about today's presentation and some of the objectives here. So I'll stop there for now.
Well, great, Joe. Thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome to everybody to what would be a really fun special edition of our Grand Round series. My name is Jürgen Onitzer, and I chair the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. And today we're going to talk about a really important opportunity for all of us, about an effort to engage and support families, caregivers, and the loved ones in the care of our patients. I think this is something we all appreciate, but in practice, most of us are really focused on the patient in front of us. And it may not be until we're a family member ourselves, family member of one of our loved ones who is getting care, that we fully appreciate what it's like, to be in that role, in that position. I've been doing this work for some 30 years now, and it really stuck with me when a family came to visit with me after we had treated one of their loved ones. And they said something along the lines of, "We brought you our loved one, our family member, and you did a wonderful job providing clinical care for them. But when we picked him back up from your hospital, we were struggling with how to care for him. There was so much we had to learn about that on our own." And I think that's a great opportunity for us. I think we know that no matter how smart we are as clinicians, we can't do it all ourselves. And if we can find ways to engage family members and caregivers as partners in the care we provide, there is, I think, so much more that we can do together. So now in a few months here, we're going to open at UW Medicine a beautiful new state-of-the-art $250 million, 150-bed behavioral healthcare facility. And it'll be called the Center for Behavioral Health and Learning. And the word learning, I think, is what we're going to talk about today. And the goal there is not just for the trainees who will work in this new facility to learn something, but for all of us to learn something, and maybe to learn something from each other. So let me be a little bit more concrete about that. So we're part of a big university here. And in that context, we're going to develop in this new facility a program called the Family and Caregiver Academy. And with that, we want to offer our patients and our family members who bring us their loved ones for care to enroll in this academy. I suspect that the learning that will happen there will be good for families, for caregivers, for patients, but also for all of us. There are so many things about living with a serious mental health or addiction problem that you really can't learn from a book or from a class in medical school or residency. And I think much of the learning really does come from, people who are living with an illness, and from those of you who care for your loved ones at home or in the community. And that's what I think we hopefully can all learn from each other in this regard. So with that setup, with that context, I'm going to introduce our first speaker today, and that is Molly Forrester. Molly is a wonderful colleague of us here in the department. Molly is a licensed clinical social worker with more than 2 decades of experience in health and behavioral health care. And a few years ago, we were really fortunate in the department here to have Molly join us in a new role as the Director of Patient and Family Experience. And in that role, Molly directs mental health navigation and access programs for families, patients, and providers across the state. And with regards to today's topic, I've asked Molly to lead the development of this new Family and Caregiver Academy. And so today, Molly is here to tell us a little bit about the vision for this new academy. So Molly, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jürgen. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. So yeah, as Jürgen said, we have this wonderful vision for this this concept of a family and caregiver academy, and what we picture is at this point is leveraging really the incredible clinical expertise of our department in evidence-based interventions and education modules for families and caregivers whose loved ones we treat here in UW Medicine. And as we've been looking at, okay, what could this look like? Who do we model this after? I've been partnering with Andy Uemoto in our department to start basically an inventory, and we've been reaching out to folks already in our department who do this work and figuring out where we might collaborate, where we might start offering some of these services. And so we'll be looking forward to sharing more with you about what we're doing, asking for your partnership in the coming months. As part of these efforts, we've also been looking at models outside of our system. And so we know people are doing this work, they're doing it really well. And McLean Hospital is one of the groups that we contacted. They're located just outside of Boston, and they are an example really of a remarkably well-developed and impactful community outreach and engagement program. Using their departmental expertise, they offer courses that are for professionals, and I've actually had occasion to take one of their courses. And they also offer a series of webinars that are for a lay audience. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to check out their website. There are really some wonderful offerings. And they've used a lot of their data about their programs to inform future programs, to make them accessible, to make them reasonable for the audience. And I have found them just to be really a nice resource that I've shared with families here. They're also, they started a wonderful award-winning anti-stigma campaign called Deconstructing Stigma that I know will be part of their presentation today. And when Jürgen reached out to them a few months ago to see if we could just start some conversations and learn from them, they have been incredibly gracious with their time and expertise, and we're really grateful for that. And so we look forward to hearing from them today and thinking about how we might emulate what McLean Hospital has developed. So thank you so much. You're on mute, Jürgen.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Molly. And now we get to virtually travel across the country, all the way to the other end of the I-90 in Boston, Massachusetts. And I get the pleasure to introduce our colleagues at McLean Hospital. McLean is, the premier psychiatric hospital in our country today. And there is a lot I think we can learn and a lot that we can be inspired by what our colleagues there are doing. They have, as Molly said, done some really amazing work in this space. And what I did is I reached out to my counterpart at McLean, Dr. Scott Rausch, a couple months ago, and he was very generous and reached out and introduced me to some of his team members. And today we have the pleasure of meeting them and hearing from them. But to get us started, I have the privilege now of introducing Dr. Scott Rausch. Scott is the president, psychiatrist in chief, and chair of psychiatry at McLean Hospital, and also the chair of Mass General Brigham Behavioral Health and Mental Health. So thank you for joining us. Thanks to your entire team. And hello, Scott.
Hey, well, welcome. Thank you so much, Jürgen, for that really kind introduction, and also for inviting us to participate in today's Grand Rounds. It's always just such a pleasure to engage in dialogue about ways that we can advance awareness and understanding about mental health through innovative methods. And I really want to begin by congratulating you, Jürgen and Molly and the whole team, on the planned opening of the Behavioral Health Learning Facility here at University of Washington, and on your proposed Family and Caregiver Academy. Mental health education and support for patients, families, and caregivers is critically needed in our field, and I applaud you and your team for looking to establish a family and caregiver academy that will undoubtedly have a profound positive impact on the communities you serve, both directly and beyond. And I just want to say, we really look forward to collaborating with you in any way that we can, especially if we can be, helpful in this. So I want to say, mental health education and reduction of stigma are areas that are absolutely vital. And I know, many of you, share in knowing this, but we're in the midst of a global mental health crisis where a majority of people needing behavioral mental health services don't receive the care they need. And that gap reflects unmet challenges in terms of adequate care capacity and a national fragmented system that's difficult to navigate, but it also reflects inadequate public awareness and the insidious effects of perceived stigma, such that people who need care are often reluctant to seek out the services. So at McLean, as you've heard, we've made major investments in growing care capacity and enhancing ease of access. But in addition, and I think it's really epitomized the presentation you'll hear today, we've been especially dedicated to outreach and public education to heighten awareness and eradicate stigma. So I'm very grateful to Adriana Bobenchuk and Scott O'Brien for their innovative approach and inspiring leadership in these efforts. As you'll see, the narratives shared by the participants in Deconstructing Stigma are accessible and compelling. Further, I think we learned together how stigma is not monolithic. It varies by culture, so that the approach of partnering with local communities for each installation and seeking diversity across the program have been critical features to their success. Finally, starting with the clever idea to launch this effort at Logan Airport in Boston, Adriana and Scott have been brilliant at seeking out unique partnerships to advance this worthy mission. The variety of venues they've leveraged around the world, together with an online presence, has enabled them to literally reach millions of people globally already. So without further ado, it's really my pleasure and privilege to introduce the two featured speakers today from our institution. Adriana Bobenchuk is McLean Hospital's Chief of Staff, and together with Scott O'Brien, they established McLean's education outreach team in 2016. Adriana has actually been a member of the McLean community for 24 years, and she has a background in journalism and is an expert in communication theory. Serving as the Director of Education Outreach, Scott has overseen the international growth of McLean's mental health education efforts, spearheading collaborations in Ecuador, Pakistan, Israel, India, and the UK. Scott's actually an engineer by trade, but upon joining the McLean community in 2011, determined that he wanted to dedicate his career toward breaking down barriers that prevent people from seeking mental health care and reducing the perceived stigma of mental illness. So with that, together, Scott and Adriana have built an international program dedicated to mental health education for lay audiences. And so please join me in welcoming them today. I'll hand it over to you, Adriana. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Scott. It's always a little unnerving to hear your boss give a present to introduce you in that way. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that great introduction and for your continued support and investment in the education outreach team at McLean, Scott. I also really want to thank Dr. Unitzer and Molly Forrester for inviting us to be present here today. And certainly I also want to thank Dr. Saramelli for giving us this opportunity to take over for a special grand rounds. I know this will be a very different presentation than I think what you typically are used to. So I was thrilled the first time I opened up an email from Molly, and it was indicating that she and Dr. Ernitzer were thinking about having a patient and family academy dedicated to mental health education. It's something that I'm really eager to support, and I'm excited to talk to you today about how McLean has approached doing something very similar. In 2016, my colleague Scott O'Brien and I launched Deconstructing Stigma, Changing Attitudes About Mental Health. It's a public awareness campaign, and really the idea was to not only increase awareness around mental health, but also to reduce the stigma that is far too often associated with mental health issues. I know that many of us have seen firsthand how stigma and shame, often related to mental health, including substance use, can impact a family, friends, a community, and certainly the individuals. While these perceptions are starting to improve, and I do credit COVID with that a little bit, because I think with the collective trauma that everybody has gone through, it's a little bit more acceptable now to begin talking about how you're feeling and how COVID impacted you. But for as many strides as we've made towards reducing stigma, there's still an awful lot of shame that continues to be too common. In fact, recent data shows us that among individuals who have psychiatric or substance use disorder, 75% say they have experienced some form of stigma. When Scott and I first conceptualized Deconstructing Stigma, our goal was to empower people with lived experience to share their stories in an honest and compassionate way. We wanted to personalize common disorders such as depression, anxiety, and OCD by breaking down the misconceptions about those who live with these conditions in a way that had not been done previously. And while we hoped that this campaign would be powerful, none of us fully understood how meaningful it would be to our volunteers, to our partners, and quite frankly, to those of us who worked on the project and continue to work on the project. Seeing the impact of Deconstructing Stigma really ignited a drive for us as individuals and as an organization to identify more ways to increase understanding about mental illness, to reduce stigma, and to encourage people, no matter who they are, to reach for help. Most of all, we wanted to continue to bring the voices of those with lived experience to the forefront, knowing that through their perspectives, we could learn and our work would be even more powerful. We've also taken what we've learned, both good and bad, and continued to grow Deconstructing Stigma. I'm proud to say that we now have 300 volunteers sharing their stories through our work. But beyond Deconstructing Stigma, we've been able to build relationships with individuals and organizations worldwide, identify gaps in mental health education and training, and develop programs that address those needs. I can't stress enough how critically important partnerships with patients, clinicians, families, and communities is to the success of any education program like this. There is an incredible power in coming together for a common cause and goal. So the most important partnerships we've developed to date as part of our work are certainly people like you, researchers, individuals, and families. Everybody who is eager to raise awareness about mental health has a partnership with us in this project. So to kick us off, I want to introduce you to Sean, who was the very first person to volunteer for the Deconstructing Stigma campaign.
When McLean Hospital came to me about Deconstructing Stigma, I felt obligated to help others break down the barrier to getting the help that they need. I didn't get an actual diagnosis of my mental illness until 32. I remember feeling some things that were problematic in my life way early in my childhood, and started off with a lot of anxiety and worry. And so I didn't talk much because I thought that I would be made fun of or looked down on. That went on for like 11 years. There was enough in me at the time to finally allow myself to get help and ask questions. When people can walk through the airport or read about these stories, I want them to also walk away with messages about compassion and just know that they're not alone.
So I'm excited to say that Sean is now a member of the education outreach team, and he serves as our advocacy liaison and works directly with all of the volunteers of Deconstructing Stigma. So what exactly is Deconstructing Stigma? as I mentioned, it's a public awareness campaign, and it was developed to spark conversation and encourage understanding and compassion about behavioral health, as well as the stigma that surrounds it. It leverages multiple forms of media and uses public outreach in unexpected places to deliver its message. And when I say unexpected, I mean unexpected. So this image here is in Boston's Logan Airport. And as we mentioned, we launched in Logan in 2016, and they have been an outstanding partner for us. They've provided us with 235 feet in one of their terminals, allowing us to share nearly 40 stories of people with lived experience. This exhibit is now a permanent display at Logan, and it is now known as the Mental Health Hall. From Logan, we were able to work our way into Burlington, Vermont, Hartford, Connecticut, Bangor, Maine. And so really, we're in almost every major airport in New England. We'd like to be in Rhode Island. Molly, as a Rhode Island native, do you think you can help us with that? We've also had pop-up travel installations in many places across the United States, and that list continues to grow. We've brought Deconstructing Stigma beyond the United States, including to the UK, Israel, India, Ecuador, Ghana, and Kenya. Deconstructingstigma.org, our website, includes a lot of information about the project, as well as showcasing more than 200 inspiring stories of people from our Deconstructing Stigma community. We have social media channels where we've worked with celebrity partners like comedian Howie Mandel to reach millions of people with our stories. And if you're on Instagram, I encourage you to check us out. It's always a really uplifting day when I'm scrolling through and I come across one of our stories and I'm reminded why we do what we do. So why do we do what we do? At McLean, like I'm sure you all, we see that mental health stigma affects patients and families every day. Shame and stigma are far too prevalent when it comes to mental illness. In fact, the perceived stigma is among the greatest barrier to having conversations about our feelings and seeking help. The stigma that surrounds these conditions contributes to the fear and isolation that individuals and their families feel far too often. So what are we doing? We are breaking down barriers, one story at a time. And by doing so, we are putting a face to mental health. And this was not in my written comments, but just so everybody who's watching this knows that this is deeply, deeply important to me. One of the people on this screen is a relative of mine who came to me when I was putting this together and said, well, I have nothing to be ashamed of. Let me be out there. I want to help other people. We use bold imagery and compelling stories to challenge the misconceptions regarding those who have been impacted by psychiatric disorders. We're telling the stories of real people, using their names and their faces to show that they're not alone, and neither is anybody else who's engaging with this campaign. These stories are told in an honest way. We work with each participant to share both ups and downs that they have experienced, to teach the public that mental health is not only a journey, but that each person's experience is very individual. While there are other public awareness campaigns dedicated to mental health, none are quite like Deconstructing Stigma. What makes us different? Well, partnering with large organizations like airports, universities, museums, really any place that has a high volume foot traffic where you're not expecting to be confronted with a story or an image related to mental health. We do this to ensure that we're reaching as many people as possible. We don't expect people to come find us. We just want to make sure they can't miss us. We seek out collaborations with local organizations to ensure people who do interact with Deconstructing Stigma, whether it's on the website or in airport or at a local university, we want to make sure that they have access to support the treatment resources, to support and treatment resources in their own community. For example, in Maine, we partnered with local advocacy groups who run regular support groups, and we partnered with a local psychiatric hospital. What also makes Deconstructing Stigma unique is that it has become an empowerment tool, one that fully integrates the patient voice into conversations about mental health. Our continued collaborations with clinical partners, people like you, who have lent their clinical expertise and guide us as we develop new educational programs and continue to work with our patient volunteers. So who are the people in the campaign? Well, there's Rick Springfield, who many of you may know from being on the radio and way back in the day on General Hospital, and Daryl McDaniels. Quoting Daryl, who many of you may know as DMC, quote, "I had everything. I was the king of rock. We were touring, making money, and everyone knew who we were. But I didn't feel right. And not a day passed that I didn't think about suicide." Daryl eventually entered into a treatment facility and began to address lifelong feelings of depression and anxiety, as well as his reliance on alcohol. When we met up with Daryl after he agreed to participate in Deconstructing Stigma, I had the opportunity to interview him, and one of the things he said to me really stuck. I finally understood that I wasn't the only one who felt this type of despair. I wanted to shout to everyone, "Hey, I'm not crazy for feeling this way." He says that by being open about his own experiences, he's opening a pathway for other people to know that they're not alone. Quote, "If you're not feeling right, whether you're depressed, suicidal, or drinking too much, there's always someone in your life who will listen and be willing to help you. Just start talking about your feelings. We all have them." We have people like caregivers, like Anne, who says she's met so many families like hers who have lost a child away at college, and they have no idea how much their child was struggling. Anne's son, Brian, lived with anxiety and depression, and despite seeing a therapist and being compliant with his medications, when he was a sophomore in college, Brian died by suicide. For the first couple of years, Anne says she could barely function, but then she started going to counseling and went to grief support groups with her husband and family. And they started to learn as much as they could about suicide and suicide prevention. They ultimately decided to start a foundation focused on supporting others who have experienced the grief of losing a loved one to suicide. And they wanted to be able to educate members of the community about suicide prevention. Anne approached us about being a part of Deconstructing Stigma because she wanted to help other people open up about their experiences and not shy away from the difficult discussions of suicide. In fact, Anne is such a strong advocate, she is single-handedly responsible for helping us get our exhibit posted in Connecticut. We also have people like Leonard. Leonard is a surgeon, and he's from Seattle, and we met him just prior to the pandemic. He told us, "As a physician, I was taught early in my career to sacrifice everything for the ultimate goal of serving my patients. I was told that doctors don't take sick days. We just put our heads down and keep getting the work done. This way of thinking made things much more difficult when I realized I needed help for my own mental illness." Thankfully, Leonard found a mental health provider who he trusted and who had experience working with physicians with mental health conditions. And Leonard began treatment right away. Now, with medication and weekly CBT, Leonard is changing his life. As part of telling his story through Deconstructing Stigma, Leonard wants people to know that having a mental health condition does not mean that you cannot function in a high-level job, no matter what that job is. So aside from having experienced a mental health challenge, either having experienced it themselves as a caregiver or sometimes both, what do these people all have in common? Their desire to use their voices and personal experiences to help others who are struggling to not feel shame or isolation. So I know we all can't see one another, but who on this screen would be willing to raise their hand right now and tell us that they have struggled with addiction, depression, or suicidal thoughts? Now imagine more than 20 people knowing your story about suicidal thoughts, your depression, anxiety, whatever it may be. 20 million people would read the details of your mental health story because you participated in Deconstructing Stigma. It's a pretty daunting thought. 20 million people. That's the type of exposure that each of our brave volunteers has faced. So why would they do this? When asked, more than 90% of our volunteers said they shared their story for no other reason than to make sure no one else ever had to feel as afraid or alone as they once felt. So before I turn the microphone over to Scott, I want to leave you with a note I received from one of our participants. My participation in Deconstructing Stigma has allowed me to fully accept myself, my struggles, my triumphs, however small, without a hint of shame anymore. For the first time, I feel truly empowered and free. I am not free of depression or anxiety, not wholly, but I've shed their damp blanket. I've strengthened my voice and resolve to help destigmatize. I'm completely open to sharing with others in the hopes that my story can help in any way. Thank you for your time, and now I'd like to pass it on to Scott.
All right. Thanks so much, Adriana. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to make sure to also thank the team for having us today. I have to admit, I am constantly surprised just over and over again at how well our work has been received. Not just locally, not just in the US, but even beyond. And you may wonder why I'm surprised everyone's talking about mental health right now. But mental health is not a topic that people really want to talk about. I mean, we have to face it, like being vulnerable is incredibly scary and sometimes just crippling. Adriana noted a minute ago that it would probably be tough for everyone who has joined us today to have those conversations around mental health, simply because we're all afraid of the consequences of what sharing is how things are going to end up for us, what situations it's going to put us in. Because when you really be honest about it, I mean, if you shared how you're truly feeling, if you're struggling, how is it going to affect you at work? Your ability to get a job alone? How is it going to affect my standing in my faith community or even within our own families? I have to admit, sometimes working in behavioral health, it's very easy for me to forget how most of the world sees mental health. We forget about why it's scary for so many people to talk about behavioral health. I won't bore you with a deck full of statistics, things you already know, but I do want you to pay careful attention to this next slide. I want to give you a moment to look at these quick stats, because some of these are the reasons that we're afraid to share. I think we've come so far in so many different ways, especially in medicine, but we still don't feel very comfortable openly discussing our feelings and talking about our experiences simply out of fear. It's really sad that in 2023, some of us are much more willing to consider taking our own lives than to admit that we need help. And the absolute worst thing about seeing some of these statistics is that every single family is impacted by behavioral health challenges. It's not just my family. It's not just yours. It's every family. But let's face it, we knew that putting statistics out into the world were not going to get people's attention. We knew that in order to have an impact, we had to tell real stories about real people and to carefully tailor the approach we took developing programming to make sure it's incredibly relevant to the folks we were getting in front of. The majority of our 300 volunteers came to us via our Deconstructing Stigma website, social media campaigns, and through advocacy partnerships, including Brenda here, who's shown on the screen. And one of the coolest things about this, as far as I'm concerned, is that most of our Deconstructing Stigma participants had no previous relationship with McLean Hospital before starting to work with us to share their stories. We've been so lucky to have so many people want to work with us to let others know what it is like to live with or to support someone who is struggling with their mental health. The fact that they put so much faith into strangers to represent them well, I'm so incredibly thankful for the faith they've had in our team. You know, Adriana noted, we're always excited to partner with like-minded organizations to bring change to communities and populations around the world. We work incredibly hard to make sure that, you know, our efforts are tailored for whoever we're speaking to, whatever audience we're getting in front of. And so for all of you who are working on doing this kind of work, I cannot stress the importance of making sure that the stories and programming that you're putting out there are making sure they resonate as much as possible with the people that are exposed to them. I can also tell you that it is absolutely essential that on any of your training and education programs are designed around the very specific needs of each population you're interacting with. A training designed for, say, first responders in the US is not going to resonate with primary care physicians here, and definitely not with primary care folks in India, and vice versa. And let me tell you, your first responders, if you're not speaking directly to them, they're not shy. They will let you know immediately that you're not hitting the mark. In the United States, we've worked with organizations like the NAACP, VA hospitals, several universities to create custom campaigns that are focused on their particular audiences. We've also worked very closely with folks like Lena, who's a physician who struggled with some mental health challenges during residency. She tells her story through Deconstructing Stigma and can be seen on our website. She's great. She's really passionate about reaching residents and physicians to help reduce stigma, prevent suicide, and also just encourage healthy coping with a group that tends to struggle in silence. In fact, one of the best things about Lena is she recently established an organization called Doctors Without Stigma, and we've started to partner with her to develop programming and campaigns aimed at supporting medical professionals of all disciplines, just encouraging them to share their experience and really to support each other and to letting them know it's okay to seek care when it's necessary. We're also working with the Maine Department of Corrections to help their officers understand healthy ways to cope with the trauma they often experience on the job. What's something that a lot of folks don't know is that many corrections folks previously worked as first responders or active duty military, sometimes both, and they often struggle in a lot of different ways and have a difficult time asking for help even when they need it. On the other side of this, I'm really proud that we've been able to create campaigns for offenders within the Maine system. It's an often ignored population, but they've been very appreciative, and we've been able to find innovative ways to offer learning opportunities and self-help resources for the offenders, because a lot of them are really actually honestly motivated to help themselves and their families when they especially prepare themselves for when they're released. Outside the US, we've partnered with groups in a lot of different places, including Kenya, India, Pakistan, Ecuador. We've developed a lot of culturally sensitive programmings around reducing stigma in each of these different countries and also addressing the different communities in each place. We've got a wonderful nonprofit partner who has set up mental health clinics in both Ghana and Kenya. And the nice thing about these centers, they're really unique, is, in my opinion, is that they not only treat, but they also train the patients to provide peer support and also employ them in managing the clinic. So it's it's a wonderful little ecosystem they've created there. And we have worked with each of these clinics to create a Deconstructing Stigma campaign at each location. And it's really cool. You can send the link later, but there's a documentary that's been made about the work being done at one of the clinics in Kenya. India. In India, we regularly host or co-host clinical trainings, lots of them for professionals. And we even hosted a week-long exhibit at the largest science museum in Mumbai, the Nehru Science Center. And we worked with the Science Center to not only to host an exhibit for the public, but we also set up a week of lectures. We had more than 50 different speakers, folks from all over the country who were working in the field of mental health, so they could share what they're working on and kind of learn from each other and use it kind of as a networking opportunity they normally would not have. What you can see in the photo is an 135-foot-long exhibit that was developed all around brain health. And that was used to teach everyone from children, adolescents, up to adults about the inner workings of the brain. And then we got into mental and behavioral health, and we included some stories from the Deconstructing Stigma campaign as well as part of that learning opportunity. We did have some local stories, but we also included some global ones as well, because as much as you want to be as relevant as possible to your local audience, I think it's incredibly important that people see mental health as a global issue and not one that's unique to their specific location or population. And with the exam exhibit was up for 7 days, and it was really kind of great. We had over 2,500 school children come and visit, except many of them coming from as many as 4 hours away, just to see that and then go back home, which was great. And the museum absolutely loved the exhibit. They were very happy. We got a lot of positive attention, and they've turned it into a touring exhibit. So that museum exhibit has been to the other, I believe, 25 science museums in their network that are located all around India. Also worth mentioning is that we brought along one of our neuroscientists and the human brain. And she was able to do brain demonstrations for everyone who visited and allow each person to hold a human brain, which may not be a big deal for anyone who's gone through residency, but as someone who did not go through residency, I thought it was awesome. We also partnered with 2 local medical colleges who allowed us to train about 30 medical students to be there for that week, and they were able to talk to the museum's visitors and give the brain demonstrations, and really kind of help us with that, which was just wonderful. It was a great collaboration, and yeah, I would highly recommend finding partners as motivated as they were. Beyond our in-person work, we definitely have a robust online education platform that's accessible to everyone, and it's totally free. Molly mentioned it before. We do have a weekly webinar series. Experts in all different topics volunteer their time to work with us to provide, sessions about all different topics, anything related to behavioral health. So, we start with school avoidance, updates on diagnostics around particular conditions, exploration of treatment modalities, what they're, situations, what they're good for, what they're not good for. Definitely on caregiver support. We've done multiple sessions about that. And something we get into, very specific populations. It's important that, folks understand the nuances around Latino, Hispanic, Latinx mental health. And our goal is really to work with content experts like you to help educate everyone who's out there and break down what are sometimes complex topics to the layperson in a way that really resonates with the audience. As you're speaking to that point before about, people being discharged from a psych setting, and then the family saying we have to go out and educate ourselves. Where are they receiving that education from? And I have to say, when we first started our webinar series, we fully thought it would be only patients and families that would be attending our sessions. We did not count on there being providers of any kind attending. With that in mind, more than 60% of our audience any given week is providers. They are medical professionals from all different disciplines. So psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, nurses, even pharmacists will come along and learn with us, ask questions, engage in our sessions. And these folks work in a variety of settings, which I think is the most interesting thing. So you'll have, people that are working in hospitals, people that are working in psych hospitals, but also folks that are working in schools or even working in private organizations. So it's a very interesting group of folks that are coming to these sessions. About 250,000 people have signed up and accessed our webinars, including folks from over 120 countries, which I think is really great. It's really fun managing the Q&A for our webinar series because people like to say hello, especially from somewhere far away. So it's really great when you're doing something in a session in the afternoon and someone says, "Good morning from Singapore," and you start conversing with them, and you realize what time it is in Singapore, and that someone stayed up till 2 or 3 in the morning just to join you. It's pretty special. We've done about 150 webinars over the last 3 years, all different topics. And we've actually been really lucky. We've actually done about 20 of them with private organizations, sometimes, for-profits, nonprofits, who are seeking to educate their staff around very specific topics or situations that they're in. Early on in the pandemic, there was a lot of concern around burnout with healthcare organizations, certain nonprofits that supported healthcare. So we were able to work with them on those topics. But, some of the ones that really kind of got us not excited about the topic, but excited to help were certain organizations where they might have had completed suicide within their executive ranks. And they reached out to us and said, "Can you help? Our staff is really struggling." So we were able to kind of step in, and I'm really happy we were able to kind of mobilize and make that happen. One of the things I would say that I'm proudest of in terms of the work that we've been able to do is some of those live virtual courses that actually Molly brought up before. We've done courses on a lot of different topics now, trauma, the global impacts of trauma, suicide prevention and assessment. And the newest one we did last month is called Emerging Leaders, which is focused solely on skills development for early career clinicians. It's really a way for us to kind of help share knowledge from the McLean community, and really kind of help, I don't want to say, it's only a couple of hour program, but really kind of pass down skills for early career folks in a way that we can't mentor everyone out there, but being able to say, hey, here's 3 hours of knowledge from some of our more seasoned clinicians. Here are things that you can implement right away in your practice. Here are some skills that you can take tomorrow and run with. I think it's a really nice thing to be able to offer. And the best part of these online courses is that they are free. We offer them for free. Anyone who wants to join. If you're seeking CME credit, CEUs, they're available for all of our programs at a very low cost. And there's also no limits in participation for free attendees. They can join in real time, participate in the program just like everybody else. Our programs are really heavy on audience participation and Q&A as the sessions are going on. So anyone who joins, we love it when they ask questions, and it helps us, make the conversation as relevant as possible to the audience who's attending that day. I will say, while I had some fun with this particular slide, we do take our efforts very seriously. We work hard to be the reliable resource that we think that McLean can and should be. And we, use our platform to share knowledge with thousands of viewers during each of these programs. And we're excited that many people also continue to access our courses via the online archive, and they'll attend one of our courses and then pass on the links afterwards. So more and more people are accessing this information than we can even, calculate. And through these efforts, we're having, I believe, having a tremendous impact in helping providers improve the quality of their care in, different corners of the globe, like I said, about 120 countries. And also, we're also doing our best to help support psychoeducation and the needs of the public when it comes to these things. As someone with a background in engineering, it should come as no surprise that I am a data person. I spend a heck of a lot of time looking at, all of our different data sources, and it truly informs our content and education strategy in terms of our programming. Based on what we find, we develop content that's really relevant for all of these online searches and the people what they're looking for. We've got a pretty robust content library up on our website right now. It gets about 4 million views a year from people that are all over the globe. It's a little embarrassing to admit, but sometimes I find myself looking through our analytics reports, even on the weekends. And I can't tell you how much I like to be pleasantly surprised by what I come across. When you do the work that we do kind of in the digital space, it's very easy to lose sight of the impact that we have. I'll be honest with you. We sometimes see page visits and all the data that comes across, and we see them as numbers, and we set metric, we look at our metrics and what are our goals, and we forget that each of those people who are viewing, interacting with our content are people who are learning thanks to our efforts. And one Sunday morning in particular, I was looking through our list of our popular long form pieces on our website, and I just picked one at random, and it was about borderline personality disorder. And I went to see who was visiting that page, who had visited over the last month and where they were from. And as I was scrolling to the bottom of the list, I was pleasantly surprised by what I found. Madagascar. 4 people that month visited that particular article on our website from Madagascar. And based on the data we have at our disposal, we knew they actually read and fully read the article and engaged with it, which I still think is pretty great and remains one of my favorite statistics. So thanks to having and using the data available to us, and by leveraging our digital presence and our team's really kind of combined expertise in communications, along with the clinical expertise of some of our partners at McLean and beyond, we've been able to really have a global impact and reach far more people than we ever thought we ever would have reached in the first place. I do hope that all of you will do your best as you're creating this patient and family academy, to help remember the impact that you can have by producing content like this and getting it out into the world, because you're having an impact in your own community is absolutely wonderful, but also you have the ability to have an impact on communities all around the world. Before I let you go, I did want to make sure to thank the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences for inviting us here to speak today. I'll be honest, I never really fail to appreciate people's willingness to give us the time and a platform to talk about the work that we do. I really hope that our kind of passion in this team for the work that we do is apparent via Zoom, honestly. And since he's here with us, I will put him on the spot just for a second. I want to make sure to thank Dr. Scott Rausch, not only for introducing us today, but also for his unwavering support for the work that we do. Scott's faith in us has been absolutely crucial in our ability to kind of take this education platform as far as it's gone. So what's next? We will continue to partner with as many groups as possible around the world who want to, who share our goal of changing attitudes around mental health and reducing stigma in their communities. I hope all of you will always kind of do your best to make sure people know that they're not alone, and encourage people to get out there and tell their stories regardless of what the platform is. And please do never forget, every time someone shares their story, they are deconstructing stigma. Now that you've heard from Adriana and myself, I think it would be nice if you heard a few words from some of the brave folks who have trusted us to share their stories with the world.
Deconstructing stigma. Deconstructing stigma.
Deconstructing stigma.
Deconstructing stigma.
When Scott first broached this idea, it seemed like a good idea, and I didn't necessarily anticipate it would turn out to be a great idea.
It's really such an exciting and emotional day today. More than anything today, I wanted to publicly express our deep gratitude to each one of you whose personal narratives and larger-than-life portraits grace these walls. Your courage and candor in driving the fight against mental health discrimination is absolutely inspirational.
1, 2, 1, 2. When people walk, read, and experience somebody's real deal, that's how you have a massive, positive, successful effect on people's lives. And I don't mean for this to rhyme, but it's going to remove the guilt and shame, and then it's going to remove the pain.
It's amazing to see it all come together.
It's pretty, I've got like goosebumps just saying that.
I'm a little blown away.
This is very empowering because it helps me.
When I first saw my photo, it was pretty surreal, actually.
When I first saw my photo, I was overwhelmed.
Kind of surreal. It's going to make a huge difference, I think. So.
It's sort of normalizing it by being able to talk about it.
I hope that the person that feels like they're alone with mental illness right now walks past it and feels a little bit less alone.
So I just hope that other people can know that they're not alone. It's okay to talk about this stuff.
I hope people can walk through here and identify themselves or someone they love in one of these photos and know that it's okay to talk about it.
This is DMC, and the place to be, and the place for all of y'all to be is Deconstructing Stigma.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for taking the time. Thanks to Scott and Adriana for taking the time to share with us this compelling and inspiring work, this amazing story that you've built. And it's really an inspiration for us as we start to try to develop this new patient and caregiver, family and caregiver academy here at the University of Washington. I think we have a couple minutes. I think, Joe, you have a couple questions teed up. So I'll hand back to you, but I just want to say again, amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yes, thank you to everyone for a group effort for Grand Round's presentation today. It's interesting to me to think about stigma reduction as education. It probably wasn't the way that I thought about it before. It's very interesting, and there's a related question about that, about how the campaign influences or is part of education for patients and family members who are receiving treatment at McLean. Can you talk about what happens for those who are currently receiving care?
Sure. So I can get us started. So one of the things we didn't include in the presentation due to time is we also have a Deconstructing Stigma book that we created initially as a thank you gift for the first people that signed into the project. But what we found over the time was that clinicians, particularly those who run anti-stigma groups on the units, were using the book as a launching pad for conversations and to inspire hope among both the patients and their family members. So we're very excited to say that that book is now in its 4th edition. We just printed it a couple of weeks ago. We also have lots of anti-stigma groups within our inpatient and outpatient programs and partial programs. And thanks to philanthropic funds, we've been able to bring Deconstructing Stigma exhibits to the different campuses of McLean. And even there, we've been able to localize it. So if we are on a unit where there's a primary diagnosis of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, the stories are generally more about individuals living with those diagnoses. For our ECT and TMS clinics, all of the stories are about individuals or caregivers related to ECT. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Thank you. Yeah, it's informative, and thinking about incorporating that into everyday care. And a couple of related questions came up, maybe more so about ideas or vision plans for here within the Family Caregiver Academy. What might be the first focus, or what's a potential idea for a first area to focus on? That was a question that came in.
I'm going to put Molly on the spot and see what her thoughts are, but I will turn that question back to you all. This is a goal we're setting, and we want all of you to engage with us on this, because you all have something that you can share as part of, a Family and Caregiver Academy. And, we have our own families, as I think Scott O'Brien said. This isn't someone else. This is often, all of us. We have our own stories. We have our own experiences as families, as caregivers. I would love to hear from any and all of you. I know some of you are already formally engaged in this area. For example, we have a great program around, psychosis reach. But I'd love to invite all of you to bring us your ideas about what it is that we can do. The other thing that I'd love to do is create opportunities for caregivers, for family members to teach each other. There is many things that you are never going to learn from a doctor, because a doctor, frankly, doesn't know unless they have a family member or they've got their own illness. There are many things about helping a person with a mental illness that a family member can teach you much better, and that people can teach each other. And that doesn't have to be terribly formal. That can just be a relatively informal support group, 8-9 people who get together, and support each other and teach each other and learn from each other. I'm thinking of an example of a family member who said, I'm caring for a child with autism. And what I need to know is, how do I get this person to brush their teeth? And no doctor is going to tell me that. But I got 7 or 8 moms who could teach me how they did it. And that's more important to me than anything else that I learned at a doctor's office. So that's just an example. So I don't know that I answered your question. Molly, do you have any thoughts?
I do. I think as we've looked at, and some of what you said, Jürgen, is we've got colleagues in the department who are already in this work, right? So we've talked with the folks over at the Spirit Lab. So Sarah Kopelovich, Maria Monroe-DeVita, and Akansha Vaxwani-Bai, who are way ahead in terms of developing a family bridger model, a family ambassador model, the psychosis reach model. What we're hoping to do is start with something really foundational and start kind of really testing a model that would do some what we're calling transdiagnostic education and some basic skill building, basic psychoeducation. We know it won't meet everybody's needs because some folks are further down the path, but we also want that to be actively and proactively informed by patients, families, caregivers, so that we're getting evaluation feedback and we can adjust accordingly. We have some really engaged leadership in our system who also want to help bridge this, to help train our workforce, train our trainees. When I first started in this position, I had the opportunity to take the psychosis reach training, and I trained 25 years ago, and it was remarkable the hope that I felt just in being exposed to this new to me evidence. And so I think that's what we're looking to. We're gonna start small. This is unfunded work, and we're fortunate to have some philanthropy to get us started. But we're eager to get that work started and learn from everyone about what this should look like and how it should evolve over time.
Well, I think we could have probably a longer discussion and maybe go through many more questions about this, how to get projects going, how to incorporate it into clinical care, funding. and so on. But here we are just at 1 p.m. Pacific, a couple minutes after. So we'll have to end for today, but I anticipate this will be an ongoing discussion, especially with Jürgen's request that we all contribute and participate with ideas and effort. So I will say thank you to everyone for participating today in a group effort for a Grand Rounds presentation.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks again to our colleagues on the other end of I-90. Really, really beautiful, inspiring presentation. Thank you.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye now.